And I was like, these doors right here create a separation. We break our hospitals up into like puzzle pieces. That's the best way to describe it. I'm like, and this part of the puzzle is isolated from this part of the puzzle by the break in the puzzle pieces. This is the break in the puzzle pieces right here. So you have to make sure that if there's a fire, that door closes. Right? That's the important one because it's going to keep it here in this area.
Clock in, scrub up, and join us behind the red line. You're listening to First Case, a perioperative podcast bringing you exciting interviews, engaging discussions, and innovative solutions that are changing the way patients receive surgical care. Each episode, we talk to frontline staff, perioperative leadership, and nursing entrepreneurs from across the country as they share their stories, experience, and expertise on the industry we love. From the back table to the boardroom, from wheels in to wheels out, we tackle the real-life issues affecting the OR. Whether you're tuning in for surgical service education or inspiration, we're glad you're here. And now it's time to roll back and start the first case.
On today's episode of First Case, we are speaking with Josh Brackett, System Regulatory Director and Facility Services at Banner Health. And today, we're really going to take a more granular look at how our departments keep going when something happens, whether it's because the pipes burst 3 floors up and now it's raining in SPD, or the HVAC systems aren't working properly and it's too humid to open trays. A lot of things happen every day, and they can be disasters if we're not ready for them. But we do have a facilities team who is making sure that we can keep going and keep running. And Josh is really going to break that down for us today.
And there are so many layers to how much preparation goes into not just the operating room, but every single department in the hospital. And I can't wait to find out, number one, what bad things happen to Josh,
right,
but how we can prevent them from happening to us.
Absolutely. So don't go anywhere. We will be right back with Josh Brackett.
Hi, I'm Chris Blevins.
And I'm Melanie Perry.
From the studios of Healthcare HQ, you're listening to First Case.
Joining us now is Josh Brackett, System Regulatory Director, Facility Services at Banner Health. And Josh, it is a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Melanie and Chris. I really appreciate you inviting me onto the podcast. I'm excited.
Oh, yeah. So are we.
We're excited.
Super excited. And, today we are going deeper into the disaster theme, and we're really looking at who it is that handles those day-to-day disasters within our hospitals and departments, and who plays a really large role when either kind of the normal day-to-day or even the completely out of the ordinary disasters occur. And we're really going to get into that conversation with you today, Josh, and I am so looking forward to it. But first, before we get into all that and I give all the spoilers away, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to everyone?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Josh Brackett. I tell everybody I'm the code geek. That's what I do, codes and regulatory compliance. And I love it. I love every aspect of our regulatory environment that we live in because it's so confusing and so nuanced and so special to healthcare that it just takes understanding, like really digging in deep to understand, like, what's the intent and why are we doing this? And it's easy to lose sight, like not see the forest through the trees, right? So it's bringing people back and being like, wait a second, let's take it back to the root cause and like what's going on. And that's patient care at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
So that's why we're all in healthcare. And I tell our facilities team all the time, you can be a maintenance guy anywhere you want. You chose healthcare. That makes you different.
Aww.
Oh, I love that. And that actually makes me think back to the story that you hear about NASA. And they tell this story about anybody you ask at NASA, and you could ask the janitor, what do you do? And they will say, I put people on the moon. And everybody understands their role. And in healthcare, we're providing patient care and we're making patient care safe, no matter what role we do. And I have never actually made that mental connection before now when you said that, but I like that. And I like that understanding of the importance of our roles, no matter our titles. Let's think about the role of the facilities department when we're looking at emergency management or disaster preparedness. What are they doing?
It's a great question. So there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. I tell a lot of people, I do a lot of presentations and speaking engagements and things like that. And facilities is not good at telling their story. We're just not. We are executors. I was just teaching last night, actually, and we're talking through, and I was like, what are we good at, right? And I was like, getting crap done. That's
yes.
Yes.
Get it done. Right? So they're like, hey, we need this fixed. This thing's broken. Guess what? I'm on it. Gonna fix it. Not a problem. Right. So sometimes we lose sight of that strategic vision. And that's a big part of what I do, is like looking 10 years ahead, especially codes and regulatory environment. Right. But we're great at that, but we're not good at telling the story. And our facilities team works behind the scenes, making sure that the generators come on, making sure that when there's a fire, that everything is working appropriately, right? That because we do still have them. They happen in hospital. We have fires. Nobody talks about them. It's the hush hush.
It's very hush hush.
Don't say that.
and, all these things, like whether it went according to plan or not, most of the time it doesn't go according to plan. But our team's running behind the scenes, scrambling, fixing it. Like, I know what my job and my role is.
Josh, you sound like a scrub tech. Are you sure you're not a surgical technologist?
Hey, you know what? I mean, let's do it. I can do it.
I think you need to come to my program. I'm just saying, if you have some spare time. Yeah. So I know you mentioned fires, but which, yes, they happen, but we're not going to talk about it, right? But no, what types of issues do you actually encounter like on a regular basis on your day-to-day job?
Utility outages are huge, actually. So loss of water, loss of electricity, loss of, fires, sprinkler heads breaking. All good stories start with bad things happening.
Do you have a good story to share? Come on, you got to tell a story.
I have so many. You tell me which one you want, and we'll go down that route.
I thought they started with "Hold my beer," but I guess not at the hospital. That's the emergency room, right?
Yeah. Sometimes in the hospital they start with, "Hey guys, it's raining in SPD." And,
oh no!
Yeah, I've had that happen. Yeah. So, and the thing is that a lot of facilities managers have had those happen, and we have a lot of similar incidents that do occur. I make light of it intentionally because it's one of those, we have to talk about those things. If we don't talk about those things, we don't fix those things. So we have to change our mindset and our story to be one of a protecting department, right? Like we're there, a proactive department that is prepared and ready. So I say all the time, it's not if something happens to you, it is when something happens to you. It is when that sprinkler head breaks. It's when your generator doesn't come on and your hospital's black for 7 minutes and 36 seconds. It's when a tornado hits. It's when those happen. So if you're projecting that it's an if, you have the completely wrong mindset.
I've been an educator for 8 years, and my handbook started out like 10, 12 pages. And almost 9 years later, it's 76 pages long. And it's just because of those things that you talk about, right? Because every year we're like, well, we're going to add that rule because somebody broke it, right? So same thing. Yeah. It's because it happened, and now you have to have a plan, right?
That's right.
But how do you determine when those plans, right? So when bad things happen, how do you determine when it's okay to keep the procedure that was in place before going versus when it was the procedure that was the problem and you needed to change things?
That's a great question. Yeah. So, and that's actually what a lot of the emergency management teams do at hospitals. Some hospitals operate where the facilities manager runs emergency management also. And so, and that's every hospital has different structures, and that's what makes it so unique. So I put it in the bucket, let's call it the bucket of support services. That could be anything from culinary to facilities to emergency management to security to EVS, right? To more biomed, and it just keeps going. Of the support is for the patient and the clinical teams to do their job, right? So, but it depends on the hospital and their organization. So at Banner, facilities management plays a key role in emergency management, but we luckily have specialized emergency managers that serve multiple hospitals and run drills and plan things and work with the community and things like that, because it's not just isolated to the hospital itself. It's the surrounding the community. It's understanding the risk to that community, and all kinds of examples that we can go through where we plan for something intentionally, but oftentimes it's to satisfy a checkbox requirement. And that's wrong, because I tell people, I'm like, when I'm teaching, my favorite thing to do is go around and teach. Take yourself right now. You're in this hospital. What hospital are you working in? And they all know, and they're like, I'm in this one right now or wherever. And it doesn't matter if it's a contractor or vendors or hospital staff or architects or engineers, they're working in a hospital somewhere doing something. Okay. And I'm like, great. Now, the person that is next to you in the room that you are working is your most loved person. And everybody stops and they're like, wait a second. Okay. And I said, now you change your actions, don't you? And 99.9% of the time they say yes. And I said, that's the wrong answer. You just failed the quiz. Because 100%. That person is somebody's most loved person. Period.
Amen to that. And actually, that is very personal to me today. Specifically, my daughter had a procedure done this morning. And prior to recording podcast this afternoon, I was sitting in a, outpatient center waiting for her to get her procedure done. And I'm thinking about it in that same vein. That's my daughter. That is my child going behind that line being treated. And are they going to treat her just as good as if it was their daughter or their husband or their wife or mother, And so thinking about that and that lens that we always look at every single patient, every single person within our department, our hospital, they are somebody's loved one, which means they deserve the utmost level of care, just as if suddenly we were paying attention to our own child or the governor of the state was suddenly in your OR as well. It doesn't matter. They all deserve that care. And obviously that's a huge soapbox of mine anyway. So we need to get off of that and back to this to the topic of this
that's
conversation.
Another season, right?
That's a whole other season.
I think one of the hard things in preparing for the emergency, right, is the follow through, the going through, because oftentimes we hear, well, like, okay, well, we solved the problem again. So like sprinkler head busts in the ED because somebody that was on drugs thought it was a piece of candy and they hit the sprinkler. Seriously.
That's a bad day.
That's a bad day, right? So the team responds and they do the best that they can, right? But nobody knew where the valve was to shut off the sprinkler system.
Oh, geez.
So what do? They run to the fire pump. They run to the main valve that serves the hospital. And then they're on the phone with me and they're like, wait a second, the water's still coming out. And I'm like, there's still thousands of gallons in that, right? So that's why we have isolation valves to isolate smaller sections, right? So, and all of this training goes into play. And you know what I tell them though? Is that, because they're like, oh man, I did a terrible job. I should have known. And it's great. You know what you're never going to do again? You're never going to forget where that valve.
100%. Yeah. So that actually leads me to a very interesting point, and something that I even recognized myself when I was involved in a shooting at our workplace and going through that very unexpected emergency situation and the things that I just didn't know. And obviously now I do know, and I will think about them in the future for here on out. But when you think about planning for an emergency or planning for any type of disaster, simulation is incredibly important, because by doing, you learn. And I would be curious your thoughts on simulation and how you enact that when you're doing training so that people don't just talk about it, but they do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So on the side, my wife and I co-founded a training and education company focused on healthcare facilities teams, and we serve over 300 hospitals. So we talk about specifically tactics. Adult learning strategies are different than how you teach kids, right? So adult learning strategies, we know proven methodologies. We know success. We can see success. A good example of success is our U.S. military, right? And they perform what's called rote training. And it is repetitive training. It is to put them in the scenario before they are ever in the scenario. So that way, when they're in the scenario and the bullets are actually flying by their head, they're not freaking out, right? They're prepared and they're calm and they know what's going on. And that's the kind of training that we should be performing in our hospitals. It's, okay, great. Here's a fire. in this area, or here, guess what? The power just went out. Your lights didn't come on. What are you going to do? Right? Not just from a facilities team, but surgeon, what are you going to do? You have somebody open on the table. Your lights didn't come on. Yes, that happened to me too. Bad things happen to Josh. And
they look at their scrub tech is what they do.
Yeah, and they look around the room and they're like, fix it. Well, we can't.
We can't. So in that specific scenario, you got to get creative. And everybody used their iPhone, right? That's what ended up happening.
Oh,
so,
really?
Yeah, they had their iPhone. And if it wasn't for iPhones in that case, now, should have it ever happened? No, there were several things that failed for that to occur. But it did occur and it did happen. So it's now, how do we plan for that moving forward? And how could have we prevented that where it wasn't a scramble to begin with? So I like to use fire because I'm a fire protection engineer, and fires, there's probably some pyro reason from my childhood or what happened, but
do we need to talk to your mother?
Yeah.
Yes.
Do we need some childhood stories there, I'm sure, right?
I like to use fire because it's a real world thing that happens. We have fires every day in ORs, right? And they're typically isolated and small, right? But they happen all the time. But fires do still occur in hospitals. We don't talk about them. We should talk about them because very few people understand what it means to truly evacuate an area. Right? So if there's a fire, and I had a fire happen. A patient was vaping on oxygen, which I highly do not recommend.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So he clearly did not understand that there's a battery and a heating element inside of his vape stick, and that's what creates it. And he had the oxygen. It was a cannula, nasal cannula, right here, like right below. So blew up in his face. He had damage, of course, but lived. And I'm watching the team afterwards because it was all caught on camera, which was great. Because anytime we can catch things on camera, it's always good. And I watched the team, and the nurse just so happened to walk to the right room. She smelled smoke. And I was like, why did you go to that room? She's like, I had trouble with that patient. Like, it was just.
Sometimes your instinct just tells you.
Like nursing spidey senses, huh, Melanie? Is that what that is? Yeah.
And she opens the door, and what's the first thing she screams?
Either
fire.
help or fire. Yeah.
Oh,
Fire. And immediately, the nurse at the nurse's station pulls the fire alarm. That goes according to plan. The doors did not close for the smoke compartment. That was one of the downsides that we learned. It should have, but it did not. But all the other nurses and techs in the area started closing the patient room doors like they're supposed to. She ran, grabbed the extinguisher, and I love this story because she grabbed the extinguisher, and then you see her on camera, and she's like bracing to be blown against a wall when she pulls the fire extinguisher trigger.
The visuals are just killing me right now.
Into it. She's like leaning into this thing. And then if you've ever used a fire extinguisher, it kind of goes like this. It's like and that's it. Right?
That's not what you see on TV, though.
It's not.
TV tells you that it's going to be really, really intense. Yes.
Exactly. So, no. And she extinguishes the fire and everything's okay. Fire department shows up. But it was a couple of minutes. That's it. Within a couple of minutes, 200,000 square foot of the hospital is filled with smoke. So that's where those are the things that people don't understand and they don't see. And then now it's not just a wing of the hospital that we've affected. It's our entire floor of that hospital that was opened up now because those doors didn't close. So there was a training opportunity there. And I asked her a couple of things. There's a few key things for that training because I was like, look, you guys got to train the real world. I said, you'll probably never have a fire again. But if you are, you're prepared. And she's like, we're talking through it. And I said, I have a question. How did you know where to go find that fire extinguisher? And she said, if you would have asked me yesterday, I could not have told you where it was. And it's in those moments of walking by something every day, right? When you are put on the spot, then your brain triggers something, right? It's like, oh, wait a second. And you could see she ran straight to it, grabbed it, came right back. Didn't look, wasn't like looking around for it. So, and then she also asked me a question that changed my entire perspective from a clinical nursing team. and has changed how I approach my training ever since. She said, what happens if the fire extinguisher did not extinguish the fire? And I said, you do the one thing that your core tells you, your Hippocratic oath swore that you would not do, and you close that door. And she's like, oh my gosh. And I said, you have to let the fire protection systems do their job because you don't have anything else now. These are the things we have to talk about because they happen.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And it is hard, but if you don't, you've already filled 200,000 square foot of smoke already. Yeah. Right?
Oh my gosh. That's going to make me stay up at night, Josh. I'm going to have to soak on that one. So while you were talking and I was thinking about all the training and things that you have to do, I think that the hospitals are a really unique situation because you can teach and train hospital employees all day long. We go through annual competencies, we go through these simulations and all of that. But you have this other unique situation where you have strangers coming in from outside. You have the general public that may have never gone through any fire extinguisher pass race, training ever. And they are an outlier that you have to, put into your contingency plans. And I wonder in all of your education that you do and you and your wife and, how do you all plan for that when you can have all of these folks that have the right instincts, but then you have that dude with the vape that blows it all, to smoke, if you will. Ha ha ha.
It's tough. And a lot of the times that's part of what ends up happening, right? Because the general public will come in or even they'll go to grab a fire extinguisher, right? And try to help. And it's that constant reminder of our team of when somebody enters our hospital, they are not responsible for their own life anymore, period. That's it. That is part of the code that is in the code. And it says that patients in particular are deemed incapable of self-preservation, meaning that their life is in our hands from more than one aspect, from a clinical aspect and also from a safety aspect. It is what it is, but hospitals are a lot like prisons.
You have no idea.
Than one. You have no idea
what door you just opened, Josh. Hello.
They are if you think about it from that aspect, and people understand it, right? Like my team, when we're training, they understand this approach and they think about that and they're like, okay, wait a second, that makes sense.
It does make sense. It really does.
If you have a fire, you don't just let the prisoners run around the prison. That's not how it works, right? So it's the same thing. It really is the same thing. Part of that training, when we're really talking about like understanding that training, it's asking the pinpointed questions, right? It's where's your fire extinguisher? Go grab it, right? Go in the training, actually grab it, pick it up, see how heavy it is, right? It is, where is your smoke compartment doors? Most of the times I get, what's a smoke compartment door? Great, let's go find them. Let's look at them.
Let me show you.
Let me show you. And I was like, these doors right here create a separation, right? So we break I tell them, we break our hospitals up into like puzzle pieces. That's the best way to describe it. I'm like, and this part of the puzzle is isolated from this part of the puzzle by the break in the puzzle pieces. This is the break in the puzzle pieces right here. So you have to make sure that if there's a fire, that door closes. Right? That's the important one because it's going to keep it here in this area.
Contain it. Yeah.
Contain it.
One thing that you said when you're training let me back up. When you said we're training on fires, where is the fire extinguisher? Go get it. That is so important to actually do it. I can't tell you how many times I've been in our annual fire drills and they just ask us to tell them where they are. All right, where are the fire extinguishers on this floor? Okay, where are the fire, where's the alarms to pull if there's a fire? And you just tell them. There's never actually going and doing. And it's so much different when you actually go and do because of that muscle memory of in the emergency time. Now I don't have to think. I just know, I just go. And one thing I think that would make our training even one step better is to actually let the staff what do you call it when you don't fire a fire extinguisher, but spray it, I guess, when you actually spray a fire extinguisher, because you can pull and race and all this stuff all day long, but until you do it, you don't, like that nurse you're talking about, you don't know what it actually feels like. So in your annual training, bust out a fire extinguisher and let people actually spray it. I think that would make it so much better.
I'm a huge proponent of that. There's some technologies that came out, and I get it and I understand, I know why they're out there. I personally don't like them because I can coordinate and I can work with my local fire department, because guess what? Guys, they love lighting fires. They enjoy it.
Sure they do.
Yes, they do.
So, and most fire departments are willing and able to do some sort of training around that. So some have, depending on some have some specialty requirements associated with it, but most are willing to work with the hospital and be like, hey, and the thing is that we actually have tests that we have to do on our fire extinguishers, that every 6 years we have to do an internal inspection, and every 12 years we have to do a complete what's called hydro inspection. So every year a portion of those come due. So I'm not wasting anything. I can take those extinguishers and actually use them, and it's not an actual cost to the hospital at that point. So I'm leveraging my resources that I have in a manner that I would be doing it anyway. And then you're out in the parking lot and people get to see it. And they also get to feel the heat from the fire. You get to see, you're up close. You're like, how close do I need to get? Is it, and you also get to see how much of, in this case, the dry chemical powder is inside of that extinguisher. So there's so many benefits. It just can't be replicated by technology in this case. That is just a benefit.
Absolutely.
So let's move on from our inner pyro, because, I love a good fire too.
One more thing.
Please. No, go ahead.
Annually,
yes.
Annually, at a minimum, get the C-suite engaged, get them involved, do an actual drill. I want you to take 10 ICU patients downstairs. Not real, fake.
Yeah.
But I want you to actually evacuate 10 ICU patients with all the stuff that's hooked up to them, and I want you to take them downstairs because the fire's too big.
Oh, and what does that really look like?
You get to really see and feel how hard this is and how much time it takes. And then when you're done and you're like, cool, we did that. I was just talking to a hospital, and like, we did it in 20 minutes. And I was like, yeah, that whole area is burnt up. You're done. Like, that was way too long, right? They get to see and hear how to do it. So something like that just can't be replaced.
Yeah, okay, simulation. Absolutely. No, but the truth of the matter is simulation and really doing it is what really teaches you so that you can kick in and act in an emergency. So
yeah, and you can't do it online, right?
No, you cannot learn that online.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, and that's a great segue into what, I kind of wanted us to talk about, because you might not have to move ICU patients in just a fire, because like, for example, we just in East Tennessee where I am, we had tornadoes. And usually we leave that to the western and central part of Tennessee. We would like to leave those things alone. And all of a sudden we have to have those things. And, facilities has to be involved in natural disasters as well. And that might mean that you have to move patients from one location to another. And, how does facilities get involved in planning for, when Mother Nature decides to have a fit?
That's a great question. So, and it depends. It's different for different areas. So I came from Arkansas before I was at Banner here in Phoenix. And one thing I do like about Banner is that I do get to see, we have 6 states that we operate out of, all different climate areas, different zones, all the way up to Wyoming, where we're getting 20 plus feet of snow. And Phoenix doesn't get 20 feet of snow. It's a little different climate down here. But when I was in Arkansas, we had tornadoes, and it was just, when you grow up around tornadoes, I grew up around tornadoes my whole life. It was, you go out on the back porch and you're watching the tornado.
Oh, absolutely. You step outside and see where it is.
Yeah.
Oh, how big is it? Where's it?
Get the popcorn out. Woo!
So, and it's just one of those, and everybody, I talk to people that don't come from the South, and they're just like, oh my gosh, I don't know how you deal with these. I could never deal with tornadoes. And it's like, the likelihood and the risk is it's not there. But you prepare differently, right? So if it's a tornado, as an example, then we're going to hunker in place because a lot of our buildings are built to not necessarily withstand like a big F5 tornado, but they're sound structures. They're built of concrete and steel, right? So they're not built flimsy. Let's put it that way, right? So, and that ultimately really is because of what we call non-combustible construction requirements. So that leads to us, because we don't want hospitals to burn. We build them out of things that don't burn. So it does tie back to pyro.
Everything goes back to fire. We're good.
But because of that, we build them as substantial structures. Could they take a direct hit? Probably not, right? But most of the time, that's not what we're up against. But what you do have to do is think about things like, I got to get patients away from windows. I got to get them like as far as possible. And there are some really, really great lessons learned because it does happen sometimes from the Joplin tornado that hit the Mercy Hospital there. That was 20 plus years ago. But there's several case studies out there specifically around resiliency of hospitals and the changes that we made associated with that. Katrina, same thing, even though it was 20 years ago. Our training approach of things is different now because a lot of the younger facility techs that are coming in don't know about Katrina. They don't know about
that's true.
That is true. Yeah.
Their big things are like the tsunamis or the wildfires in California. So you got to change your tactics to align with things that they understand. But so you have to target really the training to the audience that you're talking to. Katrina is a great example, though, of where do people go in the event of an emergency? They go to the place that they know is going to be open, the place that they know is going to have power, the place that is going to take care of them, and that place is a hospital, right? So, and that's exactly what happens, and that's what we see when we have these major natural disasters: is that people flock to the place that they know that they'll have care,
that they consider safe. Yeah.
That they consider safe, that they think can keep them warm and safe and protect them.
And they have the people that will do that for them.
Yeah. Because that's the thing. Like, they also know, like, inherently people know that hospitals don't turn you away, right? It's you are welcome. It's open arms. Come on, let's go. Let's just a big group hug.
And fire.
And we have, if you think about the wildfires in California, it's a completely different methodology, it's a completely different way of thinking, because we're still defending place occupancies. We still have patients that we have to take care of. And when that fire starts getting too close, I'm now sucking air in from outside. I suck air in from outside for HVAC to keep the building cool and things like that. We have to think sometimes about, okay, well, in the event of an emergency, then the codes and regulations side of it, like air changes and humidity and temperature and all of that, that goes out of the window, right? That's no longer the concern. The concern is I can't let smoke get in here, period, right? So sometimes you have to deviate and you have to understand, and that's a training component in and of itself. Is it's okay to violate a code or something if you are protecting a life. Right? If there is something else that is influencing and pushing you to do something, to react in a way, then do it, because that's what we're going to do. We're going to protect the patients.
Right. There are oftentimes those external factors. There are, like you said, wildfires, hurricanes, tornadoes, snowstorms. I mean, pick a natural disaster. We've had quite a few of them in the past few years that we could even look back on. And they influence our care, because ultimately we are trying to save a life. And sometimes that means we just have to do things differently, but we have to be trained to think differently too, so that we can do that. And that kind of leads me to the last thing we're going to get to talk about today, because we are rapidly running out of time, and I'm so sad because this is so good.
Every time.
But you teach on this topic, and you've already said that a couple times that you do, and you're providing your students with some different tools. And when you and I talked beforehand, you talked about how bad things happen to Josh, and I would just like to hear kind of what tools that you provide when you teach, and how you are able to educate others so that they can think through these scenarios.
People don't learn by reading code or reading law to them, right? Like, here's the plan. Let me read you the plan, right? It's not how people learn. People learn through stories. And the more stories that we can tell, the more that we can share, that's how they learn. And it's like, here's what happened, and then here's what I learned from it. And here's how I responded differently. And here's how it's changed my way of thinking moving forward. The nurse as an example, right? So that's one that I hold very close to my heart now. Whenever we lost power at a hospital that I was at in Arkansas, we lost power for over 7 minutes. And 100% black. And we learned from that a couple of key things. One that I will always think of is that the ventilators operate off of medical air. Well, medical air is a compressor, and a compressor requires power. And when you lose power, you lose medical air. So when we lost medical air, our teams were running upstairs carrying medical air bottles and cylinders because we didn't have medical air nearby. So, and the beauty of all of this, like I can talk about this because nobody died, right? And nobody was injured. There was no hospital associated infections. So like what a great opportunity to be able to share what happened and what we learned from it. Guess what we now have close to the NICU?
Medical air.
Yeah. Right? So something I would not have thought about, because you have to, and really preparing is, I like to say Tesla has the 6 levels of why or something like that. Why are we doing this? 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 Why? Okay, so it's similar to that. It's okay, but what happens if this happens? 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 And continuing to go through that. And when you hit that, I don't know, because you're going to, when you hit that, I don't know. Okay, then how would we respond? What would we do? Where would we go? So one other key thing that I talk to teams about, like when I'm going around, is that I will see, and I have seen, a lot of hospitals will go on divert for X reason, right? Whatever that reason is. Sometimes it's a very legitimate, like the utility blew a transformer and we're struggling to get the power back to the hospital, or the boilers in one of my hospitals, we had an electrical surge come through and it blew what's called the PLC boards on the boilers, and the boiler shut down and it was -5 degrees outside, right? So and could not get the parts, couldn't fix it, ended up having to evacuate the hospital after 30 something hours. That was a legitimate. But sometimes I'll see where we're doing design and construction projects or something like that, and we'll go on divert as a just in case. And I like to phrase it, my whole focus in life is if I can reach Nowhere, North Dakota, the technician in Nowhere, North Dakota, which doesn't exist, by the way, but if somebody ever made that account, if I can reach that technician in Nowhere, North Dakota, and help them understand the impact that they have, then that's success, right? So, and in Nowhere, North Dakota, if that hospital goes on divert, there's not another hospital around for 100 miles. So the entire community suffers as a result, right? So it's one of those sometimes I see that gravity is not taken as seriously as it should be.
Right.
Because,
yeah. No, please. Yeah. I wish people understood the impact that they have, and that they are more important in every single role that they have, even if their own hands aren't touching a patient, because every single patient matters, and every single screw, every bolt, every food served, every smile given, it makes an impact on those people, even if they're never told thank you. So Josh, Melanie, and I give each other this look every single episode when we're running out of time, like, oh, 5 more minutes
already.
I know, but what a lucky people we are, right? Because we get to talk to amazing people like you, but we always want to give those last few, seconds to our guests. Thank you for coming, but what final thoughts would you like to leave the people who are getting to hear this that may be in that moment, so that bad things that happen to Josh don't happen to them?
Put yourself in the patient's shoes. And there's a couple of ways you can do that, right? So it is name your patient. Think about it as your loved one. That's one way, right? Number 2 is, I like to, when we're doing construction project, we're doing whatever, it's not the nurse manager down the hall, it's Susie down the hall. Susie's a person, and Susie is taking care of patients. If you name people, then we as people in general, we we are desensitized to multiple people. When you have a name, you're not desensitized, and it becomes real. It's a real thing. Susie's a real person. The other thing that I recommend is name the patient. Banner did this, and this is one of the number one reasons that I'm at Banner. I serve Sophia. You serve Sophia. Chris, you serve Sophia. The contractors serve Sophia. The surgeons serve Sophia. And when everybody's serving Sophia, we are all rowing the same direction.
I love that.
I'm going to give you the final thoughts every single time.
That's excellent. And that is a great note to end on, to reorient our perspective to what we're really doing, no matter what role we play. So Josh, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today and to share your expertise with our audience. I know that everyone who listens will walk away better prepared because of this conversation. So thank you so much.
100%. Thank you so much for having me.
That was Josh Brackett, System Regulatory Director and Facility Services at Banner Health. And Chris, we always know when there's a problem in our departments, but we don't always see what's going on behind the scenes to keep our hospitals and our departments running smoothly. And Josh really kind of pulled the curtain back and showed us what the role is of facilities, and also just all of the thought and planning and training that goes into keeping our department and our hospitals safe from a structural standpoint, but also from a training and education standpoint too.
And just where his heart is and how he trains his people to care about the person that is on the table. I mean, he reminds me of what we do in the classroom, right? Every single patient could be your mother, your loved one, and that he trains all of the ancillary staff that are just as important as those of us who are actually laying our hands on the patient, that what you do matters. And it just goes to the heart of who he is. And I'm just going to say it, like, Banner Health is so lucky to have him. Give the man a raise. I'm just going to say it.
100%. And you hit on something that I know so many people in our operating room departments can really relate to. The patient might not know who you are. They might not ever know your name. They might not ever see your face. But no matter the role that you play, you are making an impact in their care, in their safety, and in their patient experience. And that is valuable, and that is making a difference. Everyone, that is going to do it for this week's episode. On behalf of Chris, myself, and the whole team here at First Case, thanks for listening to this week's podcast.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of First Case. As a reminder, you can help support us by subscribing to First Case on your favorite podcast app or by downloading the smartphone app on iPhone or Android. Simply search for First Case in the App Store or Google Play. The best thing about downloading the smartphone app is that you can access bonus content for certain episodes and view episodes in certain categories, like articles on the go and vendor spotlights. Are you following us on LinkedIn or Facebook yet? If you are and you love an episode or post, then let your social network know about it. Like, comment, or share our posts along with your thoughts and keep the conversation going. If you have any topics or guests that you would like to recommend for a future episode, just send us an email to info@firstcasemedia.com. We look forward to hearing from you.